Taping the ribs. Okay, ribs are often quite troublesome for people, especially if you have things like hypermobility. Okay, a lot of time positioning is to blame. So if you slouch for me, Johnny, what happens a lot of the time, guys, if you just move this out of the way for me, Johnny, what happens is we compress all the space in between the ribs when we slouch. Okay, so our little intercostal muscles get very kind of cramped. They don't get a fantastic amount of blood flow. Sometimes they can become a bit spasmy, and what happens is the attachment point for the ribs into the spine can, through muscle spasm, contraction, cramp, or even just prolonged kind of tension and positioning, sometimes they can twist a little bit and essentially sublux the rib. If this happens, you will 100% know about it because it feels like you've literally been stabbed through the back with a sword. If you relax, Johnny. So the way that we want to tip the ribs is to use the KT tape how it's supposed to be used, to cue your body into the right position. Because with things like hypermobility, low muscle tone is a thing. So where we should have a lot of upper trap muscle tone to keep everything lifted up, lower trap muscle tone, spinal erectors, high muscle tone. What happens is often we don't. So what happens is sometimes we end up slouching. Sternum drops, compresses all of the ribs, and even causes things like costochondritis, where the costocartilage that connects your rib to the sternum starts to get really irritated and inflamed because there's so much kind of shear force on it almost. So for the taping, what we need to do is to cue you into the right position. Okay, so before we tape, let's talk about different tape lengths. We want 4 pieces of tape that are roughly from fingertip to the middle of the hand. Okay, sorry, so from Johnny's elbow to his fingertip, the tape is about half the length. Okay, we need 4 of them, and we also need 1 piece of tape from the fingertip to the middle of the palm. Once we've got the tapes measured and obviously rounded off, we're ready to begin. So what we're aiming for this is to have strips of tape here on Johnny's back, okay, angled this way to help cue him to lift his sternum up, okay? So before we tape, you need to get into the right position. The right position, if you just slump yourself, Johnny, is we want to bring the belly button in and down to add a bit of tension to his abdominals. And then we're going to lift the sternum up, okay? Breastbone up, keeping the tension in the belly. Because if you don't put tension in the belly, what can happen is you just end up hyperextending your lower back, and we don't get the taping right. So relax one more time, Johnny. Belly button goes in and down, sternum straight up, breastbone. Perfect. So our long strips, okay, we're going to take 2 of our long strips first. We're going to, anchor point wise, we want a bit more of an anchor point than we normally would have, okay? So you want like a good, I'd say 1/4 of the tape almost as the anchor point. I'm going to tear, pull over, get that out of the way. We're going to take this off, and it needs to go at a specific angle, guys. Okay, the tape is going here and here. Okay, don't worry if it's not perfectly aligned and symmetrical. It doesn't matter too much, but it's the angle that is important. So we need just about here, because this is going to have a lot of tension, guys, about 80-90%. Really make sure you rub the tape, okay? Really rub that tape. I'm going to stick the other one on Johnny so you can see as well. And this one is going on the opposite side in the opposite direction. Again, anchor point just wants to be a little bit longer than normal. When I stretch the tape, guys, I'm going to put my hand here to keep my hand on the anchor point just so it doesn't fly off, because there is going to be a lot of tension on this one, okay? So let's spin you around, Johnny. With this tape, guys, we're aiming for the sternum. If you have flat chest, no breasts, you can tape straight down this way, okay? And the other one will go straight down. Obviously, if there's something in the way, what you may have to do is cut the tape a little bit shorter, but just try and aim for the sternum or offset it around, as you'll see in a minute. So I'm going to peel the rest of this off just to the edge. Let me get rid of this so you guys can see a bit better. Perfect. And what I'm going to do, I get a good angle for this so I can see what I'm doing as well. I'm going to pull 80-90% of tension I'm going to come around. Keep going, keep going, keep going. Taper off. No tension on the tape down point. Give it a good rub. And the way that the tension's working is that we have all of the tape pulling us this way, okay? It just cues you to keep that sternum up. So when you're walking around, if you do get a bit tired, maybe you zone out a little bit and your sternum does drop, what you'll find is the tape will cue you because it will start to pull back up. And that's essentially what we want out of this taping video. Again, 80–90%. Again, don't worry guys, too much about symmetry. It's not that important for this. It's just about having a bit of a cue to lift the sternum up. So, just give me a 360, Johnny. Tape onto the sternum. What you'll probably find as well is that the tape actually kind of helps you keep in a good position with your shoulders. If you start to round your shoulders, the tape will give you a little cue to pull your shoulders back. Now, it's time for the remaining 2 long pieces of tape. So if you can assume this position, Johnny, so just see out the way. The way this is going, guys, I want you to just feel around your ribs, okay? Just around here, okay? Before we get to these little floaty ribs that don't have a good stability base, we want to be around here on the bulk part of your kind of ribs. And we're going to be taping this way, okay? However, the anchor point is going to go at the back again. Remember, we want the tape to cue you to lift the ribs, open the ribs into expansion. This tape is going here. I'm going to peel it off, get rid of the anchor point bit, and we're going to angle. If I spin you that way, please, Jay. Thank you. Oh, a little bit less. There we go. We're going to go here. If you spin this way. So one of the reasons as well why we've done this first for the sternum makes it easier to get your tape placement later. Here we go. Good. Remember, the anchor points, guys, need to be at the back because we need the tension going this way to help Johnny kind of get that tactile cue to actually lift and hold his ribs in the right place so he doesn't mush everything, okay? So I'm going to spin you this way, Johnny. I'm going to pull the rest of the back and tape off. Now, again, guys, 90%, okay? 80–90%. Just going to go keep that tension all the way, keep that tension all the way to about here, where we're going to just have no tension for our tape down point. Good rub, activate that adhesive, and then if you can spin around, Johnny, let's do the other side. –90% tension. There we go. Remember, no tension for the tape down point. And you can relax, Johnny. Perfect. Okay, so what we've got is now a nice tactile cue for Johnny to keep his ribs open. If he starts to compress himself, all the tape at the back is going to start stretching, and it's just going to give him a little wake-up call to keep himself in the right position. If you're not constantly compressing all of your intercostals and your ribs, irritating the costal cartilage connections of your ribs to your sternum, rib pain and things like that goes away pretty fast, okay? It's one of the biggest issues is inflammation. And obviously if you sublux the joints at the back that connect your ribs to your spine, if they're inflamed all the time, it means any kind of movement, any flexion, any extension, rotation, things like that are going to be an issue. What I will say is sometimes people are going to go for this taping technique when their ribs already subluxed, okay? You want to tape your joints in the position kind of we want them to be in. So if your ribs is subluxed, there's a really easy sublux and kind of anti-sublux exercise we can do to hopefully pop it back into place. Because a lot of people I know, they put a tennis ball here, they ram themselves into the wall, they do all sorts of crazy stuff to try and pop it in. It can be a lot simpler than that, guys. All we got to do, a little bit of tension in the belly button, in and down, sternum up, and then we're going to put our hands like this. And we're just going to keep the hips facing forward, and we're just going to rotate to the side, about here. And then all we're going to do is keep the arms like this. We're just going to do a bit of lateral flexion. Just give it a good stretch. You'll feel it all here. If there's something, if there is a rib that's overlooked, you'll probably hear as it pops back into place. Sometimes you may have to just do a couple of reps, 15 to 20 repetitions. If the sublux was on this side, we just rotate to the right, lateral flexion. Give it a good stretch or a couple of reps. But yeah, as far as taping the ribs goes, guys, easiest, most efficient way, because it's about training you to keep yourself into a good position with the ribs so they're not all mushed all of the time, twisting the ribs. And now you may be thinking to yourself, what was the little piece of tape for? Well, the little piece of tape, the middle part is the anchor. We're going to hold it like if we're applying a plaster. We're just going to tape it over here. Okay? This is especially good if you have a hairy chest. See, Johnny's nice, freshly shaved, so we don't really need it that much, but this just helps to keep these ones and these anchor points nice and strong. Perfect. KT taping the ribs. Hope you enjoyed it.